All right. So thank you for joining us. We're at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Today's session is an intro to Zoho Books. We haven't done a webinar like this in quite a while, so we thought it'd be a good idea to bring this back up. And this session is recorded, just to let everybody know, so don't worry about that. Before we start getting into the demo, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. So today's webinar is hosted by zoho.com/CPA. That's the finance partner team. That's everyone on this call today. And I'll introduce everybody here in a second. And accountants, bookkeepers are welcome. So go ahead and check out that website whenever you have a chance. And we'll talk about it here in a little bit as well. Today's webinar is presented through Showtime. And we've already been playing around with the chat box over there. That's just kind of where you can communicate with us, tell us, hey, you can't hear volume or anything like that. But I wanted to point your attention to the questions panel, and that's where you'll be able to ask us specific questions to the webinar or related to Zoho. And we actually have someone from support on the call who can answer your questions. And we'll try to answer as many as we can. We'll probably get through hopefully all of them. If we don't, we'll try to circle back and see if we can answer them later on. And I also want to ask you to check out the handouts tab at the bottom. I did include a link to our Zoho Masterclass, which is going to be a more in-depth webinars over certain sections within Zoho Books. So go ahead and check that out if you have any other further questions. And this session does qualify for 1.5 CPE credits. And if you don't know what a CPE credit is, it's something that CPAs need, and it stands for Continued Professional Education. And CPAs need it to kind of maintain their license. And in order to earn your CPE for the session, you need to attend for the 90-minute session, complete 5 out of the 6 polling questions, and we ask that you complete the evaluation at the very end of the webinar. And also anyone who doesn't need to receive the CPE, we ask that you fill out the evaluation as well. It helps us kind of better our webinars in the future, and you can, if you say you don't like me or something, maybe we'll take me out of the webinar. But anyways, I'll launch a practice poll question real quick. And Tala, I think you're really going to enjoy this. I really dug deep for this poll question. So I'm asking, how far away can someone hear a blue whale's heartbeat? So it's just kind of a sample poll question. It'll pop up throughout the webinar, and this is how you earn your CPE. And also, you can answer it if you aren't here for a CPE credit as well. And the answer to yeah, what?
Before you give the answer, is someone like a human being or like a dog? Or
I don't know, actually. I didn't get the sign.
Get that. All right, sorry, go ahead.
It's 2 miles, everyone. So keep that in mind. And I don't know if that's underwater or above sea level or whatever. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce everyone. The Zoho speakers today. So this is the core Zoho Finance partner team. We have our resident CPA, Val Steed. Val, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning and good afternoon, and welcome everyone, especially those in the terribly cold areas of the country. My name is Val Steed. I am a CPA by background and was in public practice for many years, and I was also in accounting technology for many years, and joined Zoho to help work on an accountant partner program that we'll talk about here in a second. We're going to come up on the partner program, but very happy to be here, very excited to be here. And as you'll see, by the time we get done with this event, you'll see kind of why I would take my career and really join a company like Zoho with their finance solutions, because we really, where we're going with these solutions is really a great direction.
For sure. And we also, you've heard him in the background, Tala Bakar. He's my colleague and friend. How are you doing, Tala?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much, Nathan. For everyone out there who is a accountant, bookkeeper, or CPA, or if you are a Zoho Finance user and you're interested in bringing your accounting professional along with you to Zoho, I'm typically the person that myself and Nathan, who you would speak to. Nathan's going to have some information coming up on how you can reach out to us, but I look forward to hearing from everyone, and I'm excited for this session.
Yeah, thanks, Tala. My name is Nathan Rogerson, and I'm the marketing manager over here at Zoho, and specifically with finance applications. And also I help put together webinars like this and help with marketing material as well. And kind of what Tala mentioned, I help out with the partner team. So if you need any help as far as signing up to become a partner, just reach out to Tala or myself or even Val. So let's introduce who we have from support. So D-Raj, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, can you give us a little background about yourself and how long you've been with Zoho?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Zoho for 5 years now, and my role is basically to support partners that we have, accountants, CPAs, who bring their clients onto our platform and help them manage their clients seamlessly on our product suite. So I basically take care of any questions that come my way from CPAs and accountants and make sure that they're able to move smoothly on our product suite.
Yeah, thank you, D-Raj. And I know I reach out to him a lot for Zoho questions myself. And so let's go ahead and get started with the learning objectives today. And it's pretty simple. It's just a demonstrated walkthrough of Zoho Books, so a demo of our key features. And we'll also see how to integrate with third-party tools, and we'll kind of show some of those. And we'll understand how to create a customer and vendor list for import. So really, we're trying to cover the key features of Zoho Books. And I'll go ahead and let Val explain what Zoho is to anyone who's never heard of us or who only knows about only one product we have.
Thanks, Nathan. I thought it really to be important, folks, to start this session, at least just to kind of explain to you a little bit about what's a Zoho. Where did this come from? Never heard of this company before. We're not new. Zoho, just for grins and giggles, was a bit of a play on small office, home office that turned out quite fortuitous. In that kind of mistake, if you will, in setting up the company, it turned out real well because a lot of our applications actually don't just play in small office, home office. They're actually enterprise level stuff. And we've got over 60 applications out there right now. A few things you ought to know about the company. It's been in existence over 22 years. We got 12 plus locations globally, 180 countries. It's privately owned, which is very important to understand because we don't allow external marketing forces to dictate our privacy rules. So we're huge on privacy. Our mother company, if you will, our mother company that funded us and started us is actually a company called ManageEngine that's been in the technology world longer than we have. And they have a global, they're famous for managing big companies' global networks. So if you're familiar with Azure or AWS or stuff like that, we have our own Azure AWS web. So we can really control the privacy of our users on our network. And we will not spy on our own users. We will not allow third party in. We do not have any marketing ticklers or tracking devices or tools in our software. And we will not share data with anyone. In fact, that makes it a little bit hard for us as marketing people. All we know, when you sign up for Zoho, all we know is that you've signed up. You could be using one of the 60 plus apps, and how you're using it and what you're doing, we have no idea because we're that big on privacy. So first, let's take you from the big picture. We got 60 plus apps out there in a lot of different categories. Now let's kind of narrow it in a little bit. There are certain categories that make a lot of sense. Sales and marketing. Yeah, we have tools for, and we're famous for, by the way, CRM. We have marketing tools like campaigns to do email campaigns. Great tools in different categories. We also have office tools. Slide down there, one slide there, Nathan. Thank you. So we have a full office suite as well, including a spreadsheet, word processor, mail, drive storage, almost unlimited drive storage. Tyler, what's the limit on a work drive for like typical accounts? I don't even know the answer to that.
On Zoho One, it's a terabyte.
Terabyte. Just amazing what's offered out there through our whole bundle in our suite. So tools for almost every category. But what we want to focus on today is and there's even other customer tools, which I forgot about. Sorry about that. And some of these are famous. Desk, if you do much with IT, you have customers calling with problems, and you want to set up a desk ticketing system. We have a great tool there. We also have custom tools, high-end enterprise custom tools with Creator. So at first, I want to explain to you the company, the broad nature of all the apps, focused into different groups, but today we really want to focus on the finance suite and particularly the core of the finance suite. If you look at this slide, look dead center, it's books. We've got satellites around books. We've got an invoice module in case your invoicing exceeds what books can do inside, which is simple invoicing. We've got subscription-based billings for companies that have to bill the same amount every month. We've got a pretty sophisticated inventory that even links to QuickBooks and a few other products out there in the market that people buy to hook in. We've got payroll that we're growing a number of states. We've got expense tool that actually plays in enterprise quite a bit, and even a online marketing and online payment system through checkout. So all these little satellites hover around something, and they hover around books. So books is our focus today, folks, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to show you the core of the financials being Zoho Books.
I did want to point out as well, Val, that we will be hosting more webinars around some of these products like subscriptions and inventory and expense and payroll once more and more states start rolling out for payroll.
Right. And those apps are really pretty solid in many cases. Also, we should go ahead and announce and brag on it a little bit. One of our colleagues, D-Raj, who's joined us for this call, who's a great asset for us. Thanks, D-Raj. We really appreciate you. Had worked on a partnership, folks, with SurePayroll. And so we now have a link into SurePayroll. So for any state you're in, you want to use Zoho Books and then link to SurePayroll, we've got that relationship built, and the API is also built. So should know about that. That's something we probably should have put a slide here on, but we're trying to throw a lot at you today anyway. Our group is responsible for the Zoho CPA or bookkeeper finance partner area. We've actually set up a website for that, zoho.com/CPA. Now, if you're a bookkeeper, accountant, whatever, don't be offended by that. We had to pick one domain to start with. As we grow, we'll probably have a zoho.com/bookkeepers, accountant. You get the idea. This is just one spot where we can have everybody come that's an accountant, bookkeeper, whoever, and find information and link and connect to us and get whatever resources they need. So this is our one-stop shop to try to help everybody that's accounting related. And if you're interested in joining this, it's free to become a Zoho partner. And then you can also earn commissions on software, of course, that you sell. And becoming a Zoho partner also gets you free software depending on, how your business is set up. So there's some nice opportunity through our partnership program.
Yeah, and Val, I'll go ahead and launch the first poll question. And really, we're just asking if you're interested in becoming a finance partner or want to learn more. And this will just be a quick phone call. It's not a big deal.
Right. And folks, we do that. Let me tell you why we're asking that question. It's not heavy sales. We're doing that because of our privacy rules. And we're not really allowed, based on our own internal privacy, to reach back and bother all of you that joined this webinar unless you say, okay, I want to be contacted. So we're a real careful company on privacy.
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. And so now let's go ahead and give Tala the reins so he can start with his Zoho Books demo. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
All right, thank you so much, Nathan. So I am, if you could pass over the screen sharing controls.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was working
No,
on it.
not at all.
All right, you're in control, Tala. Hey, and also, as you're kind of getting everything booted up, did you see on the right-hand side the new update that we have?
So this product that we're using is called Zoho Showtime. And I think next time for the next webinar, we might be able to actually show you our webcams while we present. So it's a pretty cool update. No, absolutely. All right. So you should be able to see my screen now. Can you see that, Nathan?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So basically, I'm going to go through the entirety of the Zoho Books application. And as we stop for poll questions along the way, Nathan's going to jump in to tell me when those poll questions are. Please let me know in the Q&A section if you'd like to see anything specific. If you have any questions, D-Raj is, of course, also on the call, and he'll be able to help answer any questions, support questions, or otherwise that you may have. So when you actually jump into Zoho Books, you'll notice that the first thing you're brought to is the main dashboard. Now, the basic purpose behind the dashboard is to be able to view certain reports immediately. So for example, if I want to take a look at my total overdue receivables, which in this business, all of our receivables are overdue, I can hover above this particular line presented here, and the yellow would be for overdue, and then there's kind kind of a blue line that comes in for any kind of current receivables. But if I want to go ahead and view a report for this, I can just simply click down on that bar, and it's going to take me to a report for aging details. Now, we are going to go into reports in much more detail as we go through this demo, but I wanted to show you a few key features about reports while we're here. So the first thing you'll notice is that all of the reports inside of Zoho, Zoho Books specifically, are designed for you to access specific information right away. So if I want to view this invoice directly, I can simply click on this link, and it's going to open up that particular invoice. If I want to view all of the invoices and other information for AR for a particular customer, I can simply click on the name of that customer here. And then at the top right, you'll notice there are a few more options for reports. So not just the aging details report, but also the other main reports we'll see, you have an option to automatically schedule this report to be run at a certain frequency. So let's say I want to simply have this emailed to me every week or every month. I can set up this automation rule to send this to me as a PDF, a CSV file, or a Microsoft Excel file. And you can also enter in additional recipients. So if you need to have a report sent to your accountant or CPA, and you need to do that maybe on a quarterly basis, you can actually set this up and not have to remember how to do that. We are going to come back to some of these customization options, but I just wanted to show you a little bit about some of the key features inside of reporting. Now you'll notice that payables on the right-hand side do exactly the same thing. So there's a bar for current and overdue. I can click on it. It's going to take me to a report for my aging payables as well. And the same goes for if I click down on my overdue. So it kind of separates them out by certain day ranges. Now, not all of the options here are fixed. You do have some options to modify the timescale. So for example, for this cash flow graph, I can change this particular time graph to show this fiscal year, to show the last 12 months or the previous fiscal year. Now, I can also hover above a particular point in time to see my opening and ending balances for that month. And of course, clicking on this will take me to a cash flow statement. Below that, you're going to notice some other important reports like income and expense and top expenses. So the income expense is essentially your profit and loss. You can, at the very core, you can view how much money is coming in as income and how much is going out as expenses. Of course, there's other costs associated with doing business, so this isn't all of those, but I can go ahead and click on any of these bar charts, and it's going to take me to a P&L report for that particular period. I also have the option to toggle between cash and accrual basis, which is really helpful, as well as the date ranges here. Top expenses are very self-explanatory. Hovering above each of these different colors that corresponds to a particular expense category gives us the amounts, and clicking on this will take us to a specific report for my expense details. Now, something that's a little bit more unique about Zoho Books is that it also contains an entire project module or time tracking module. Now, the projects are designed to be really simple. It's just a way for you to record time and bill your clients based on that time. So we are going to jump into time tracking once we kind of go through some of the other modules, and you'll see all the different options for tracking time. But just remember that if you are billing your customers based on time, it might be based on tasks that you have or multiple employees that are working at a different hourly rate. You can actually set those up inside of projects. And you can even send things like client approvals to the customer for them to approve the hours if you want to. So that is an entire module that's here within Zoho Books. And then lastly, we have integrations with your banks and credit cards. So in the banking module, which we'll jump into, you'll see how you can integrate into any of your personal or business checking accounts, credit card accounts, or otherwise. And if you have, let's say, a business checking account that's receiving your credit card deposits from customer payments, I'll show you how you can actually match those deposits with transactions inside of your Zoho Books organization. So that is it for the basic kind of dashboard for Zoho Books. The other important thing I'd like to mention is that on the dashboard, you'll find there is a live chat here. So this is available 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday. And you can chat with someone directly from the Zoho Books team. Super easy way to get a quick answer. You can even ask them to schedule a more in-depth call with you if you'd like. And then there are some other help resources that I'm going to point out to you. Before we go on, I just wanted to talk about this Sure Payroll integration. So when we get to our integrations page, we're going to get further into this, but we have two payroll software. So one is Zoho Payroll, which is available in a handful of states right now. And then the Sure Payroll integration which helps kind of fill the gap for all of those other states. So don't worry, I am going to jump into that.
Yeah, and
Now,
also, since sorry to interrupt you, we are looking to do a Sure Payroll webinar in the future, so be on the
Okay,
lookout
awesome.
for that as well.
Okay, fantastic. So now kind of moving on to some of the other options, I'm going to use this left navigation pane to guide us. So if you have your Zoho Books open, if you'd like to poke around while I'm going through this, just remember that you can always find where I am by looking at this left navigation pane. So let's jump into items. Now, items are a little bit of a misnomer because you can be a service business and still have to use items here. But the first option we're going to look at is the second option, which is items. You're going to notice there are a few options here that may not relate to you or you may not see in your Zoho Books. That's because I have the integration with Zoho Inventory set up. So once you have the Zoho Inventory integration set up, you're going to find some of these additional modules that become active here. But the base one we're going to start with is items. So items is where you basically have a record of all the products or services that you sell. So if this is a product, if I'm selling some sort of retail, I can simply enter in the basic information for this product, add an image, and I also have all this additional information that again came from Zoho Inventory. And then the basic stuff will be how much you're selling this for, how much you bought it for, and if you'd like to track inventory. Now, if you are a service-based business and you are not selling any particular products, you'd simply toggle service at the top here, put in the name of your service. This won't show up for you. And if you have any additional costs that you'd like to associate with it, typically that's not something that you would have for a service-based product. You can simply put in your sales information. So for example, this could be a fee for a consultant that they may charge per hour, an accountant's fee. They may have different rates for different types of services. So this is where you'd be able to enter these so that when you create an invoice, you don't have to generate these every single time. And then this also lets you run reports based on these particular services that you have so that you can see how many of them that you sold or quantities of those that have gone out in an invoice. Now, of course, for products, there are some additional options, as I mentioned, like tracking inventory. Tracking inventory allows you to be notified when your inventory levels fall below a certain amount. And if you're using Zoho Inventory, you also have some advanced features like warehouse management, which we're not going to get into today. We've done in the past, and we will also do a Zoho Inventory specific webinar. But just remember that these are some advanced features that you have an option for. One thing that you'll notice throughout the demo as I go through is there are tags that you can associate with different types of transactions. So if you are coming from the world of Zoho, of QuickBooks, these are typically called classes. So these are customized for my particular business. They're not going to mean anything to really anyone outside of it. And so essentially what tags are custom categorizations that you can do to group transactions together. So think about it like this. Let's say you have two different lines of business. For example, maybe you sell a line of services and kind of consulting fees that you have, but maybe you also sell some sort of merchandise. And you'd like to be able to run a profit and loss report that's specific to those two lines of business, but individually. You could create a line of business category. And in this case, I have these kind of categories. But I can associate all of my products that I sell to one of them, and I can associate all of my services to another one. And whenever those transactions are taking place, when I run a report, I have an option to filter by these categories. That's essentially what a tag is, and I'll show you some of the other places you can use them, but they are really useful to help group transactions together. So that is some of the basics for items. Another feature you'll find is price lists. So price lists are helpful if you may have different set of prices for maybe for different times of year or for different types of clientele. So maybe you have a wholesale set of prices and you also have a retail set of prices. This would let you actually set up an entire different kind of inventory or service price list. And you can do that by simply doing a percentage markup or markdown on all of your inventory or service list. Or you can actually have individual rates for certain items. This could be, only for a handful of items, for all of them. You can also use this for currency conversions. So for anyone who is doing business, let's say, for example, in Canada and the US, instead of having a direct currency conversion, which can look pretty messy, you can actually just set up custom prices in those various currencies instead of having to do that. You can also set up volume-based pricing schemes. So if somebody buys between a certain quantity, it's at a certain price, and if they buy between a different set of quantities, it's at a different rate. So maybe discounts for bulk purchases. This is actually also something that you can set up inside of Priceless. So these are just some of the basic items that I wanted to show you inside the items, the basic modules inside of the items module. So again, don't worry about some of these other ones you see. We'll take a look at them when we do an inventory-focused webinar. Now, jumping into...
Tala, before you continue, I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll question.
Sure.
And if you could check out the trainer chat, Tala.
Certainly.
And the question I asked Tala was just, what industry are you in? So as you're kind of going along, maybe you could kind of point in that direction, I guess. And if you said other in there, go ahead and let us know what other means in the chat section. But it looks like the majority of everyone on this call, service and retail and finance and accounting.
And I wanted to answer a question that I saw in the questions panel. So the question was, what if the item's purchase cost changes over time? That's a great question. So if you remember when I was inside of items, there was an area that asked for entering in the purchase cost. This is the initial purchase cost of this item when you're creating this. Whenever you create a purchase order to purchase additional quantities of inventory, the price of that's listed on the purchase order for per item is updated. And so one of the important things to note for Zoho Books and all of the Zoho Finance Suite is that inventory management is done on a FIFO basis. So it's first in, first out. So when you are running inventory calculation reports based on the value of your inventory, it's going to be calculated based on FIFO. So that is updated. If you need to change the vendor, this is basically a preferred vendor, so that if you saw it down below here, you can set up a preferred vendor for your reorder points. That simply allows you to create a purchase order more quickly, but you can always switch the vendors. This is basically just to help pre-fill some information in. But that was a great question. All right. Can I go ahead and continue?
Yeah, go for it. I just want to let you know that the majority of everybody here is service and retail and accounting and finance. So just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're going through.
Fantastic.
If you need to do any examples, I guess.
Sure. No, for sure. Thank you so much. All right. So moving on to the banking module. So the banking module is pretty powerful inside of Zoho Books. Just to kind of address the basics as far as why you would need a banking module inside an accounting system, the basic premise is that it makes it a lot easier to know exactly what is synchronized between what's happening in your accounting system or your actual business and what's happening in your bank. So earlier I made the example of, let's say you have a business checking account and we are taking in payments from our customers in credit cards. So whenever those credit card payments are deposited, we need some way of actually matching those transactions to our invoices. And there is further detail in terms of how this is done, because most of the payment integrations we have some sort of holding account or clearing account, and they do kind of bulk deposits. But I'm just going to go through kind of the basic premise of how you can actually match transactions. So before we do that, let's add a bank or credit card. So at the top right, you'll see this Add Bank or Credit Card button. There are some major institutions listed here. And if you have any other bank, we do thousands of banks in the US and Canada, you can simply look for it here. So for example, where I live, I bank with a small credit union called San Mateo Credit Union. They're listed here too. There are credit card accounts also in Canada. There are thousands of banks and institutions listed here. A little bit about how this works. So account information is processed securely through a third party called Yodlee. So essentially what that means is that all of these forms that you see here whenever you click on, I should have clicked on a credit card account like Bank of America, So these are all PCI compliant, meaning Zoho encrypts all this information, and we don't store this information either. This is basically passed on to our secure a partner who has a partnership with all of these banks, and they're able to pull that information from them. So if you've ever used an app like Mint for any kind of financial tracking, personal finance tracking, it works on the exact same premise. So signing up here allows you to bring in that account. You don't have to do that if you want to enter your account manually. You can simply create the account, not have to put in any login information. The only difference is that then you'll have to import your statements from your bank or credit card institution, which is just an extra step that you have to do. So once you have a bank account set up, you're actually going to be able to pull in transactions. So I'm going to go into this account that I have here, this Chase account. And what you'll notice is that you'll get a little icon here for if your feeds are active. This is the demo account, so these aren't active feeds. But what you are able to do is actually refresh those feeds. If I need to activate these, I can bring in more transactions. But what happens is all of your bank transactions come here exactly as they're listed in your bank account. Now you'll notice that these are all withdrawals. So if I try to match any of these transactions, it's going to try to find a expense or some sort of bill that's going to match up to it. So it hasn't found any, which is why it's asking me to categorize manually. What happens is that when you create an expense, or let's say you have an invoice for a customer, and you come here to the banking module, when you click on any of these transactions, Zoho Books looks through all of your outstanding transactions, invoices, if it's a deposit, if it's some sort of receivable, or if it's a withdrawal, it'll look through expenses and bills. And it looks through the date range and the amount, and it tries to find a potential match. That allows you to categorize these transactions a lot easier than having to search through them. But in this case, I never created the expense for this Google Voice charge for $25. So I can simply categorize this manually from here if I haven't already created the expense from the expense module. So this is another place where you can actually do that. Now, the benefit of this is that once you've categorized all of these transactions, this allows you to actually clear all of your transactions and make it a lot simpler. And sorry, give me one moment. I'm having some technical issues. 1 second.
Okay, yeah, and also what I've noticed through the banking, whenever you're categorizing accounts, it also just makes it a lot simpler in recognizing and remembering how to
Thanks,
your
Nathan.
expenses for sure.
Sorry about that. I was getting some static in my headphones, so I had to.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I was just talking about how whenever you go ahead and click, can you create like a fake? Just go ahead and go through the whole process so that everybody can see what it looks like.
Sure. So we're going to see this in the expense module too, but let me show you here. So these categories are basically kind of standard expense categories. You can add these as well. These aren't the same as the chart of accounts. This is different, which we'll look at. But let's say, so my Google Voice expense, this is, let's say, an IT expense that I have for my business. I can add in the vendor, so if Google's already here. And so this is, of course, a pretty old expense. If I have the receipt for it, I can go ahead and attach that too. There's a couple other ways that you can associate receipts to your transactions. And then if this expense was for a customer, I can also add in the customer information here. So let's say this expense was for a customer project that we were working on, and I just want to be able to know that that expense was for them. I can simply associate it with them. But let's say I actually want to charge the customer for this expense because we took it on behalf of them. I can mark it as billable. And I also have some options where if I need to mark this up, I can do so. But the next time I generate an invoice for this customer, Aaron Brown, it's going to actually let me bring in this expense as a line item to charge them for on that invoice.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. The other option you'll see here is that projects can be associated with a customer as well. So if I'm working on a project and I want to be able to run a report that shows me all my expenses for this customer's project, I can do so. But this is the basic premise of this transaction. I'll just associate it to Aaron. I'll hit save. And now that has been categorized for that transaction that we had. The other thing that you'll notice, and this already popped up for me, which is really helpful, is that you can create rules to help you categorize certain transactions. So let's say this is a regular transaction that comes up every month. It could be a transaction like a utility bill that you have. Let's say it's a phone bill for your company. some other service charges. And you can set up these rules that help look for certain information that comes into your description here, or maybe, which is also relates to the amount. So you can create these criteria, and then this will help you categorize these transactions automatically. It's still going to ask you to confirm it, but it helps you save time so that you don't have to go through all of the steps that we just went through.
Yeah, it helps out a lot of businesses where, they have a bunch of Amazon purchases and stuff like that, where it's just an automatic utilities or business expense.
Yeah, if something happens on a regular basis, that's where that would be helpful. The other main feature that I want to show you here in banking before we move on is the reconciliation option. So once you are done for a month or a quarter, and you want to go back, I would recommend doing this every month, is you want to reconcile the account. So what this means is that I can actually go ahead and click on reconciliation, which you just saw there under more. I can initiate a new reconciliation, and it's going to ask me to put in the closing balance for this particular period. So let's say I open up my bank account and I see that my closing balance is $250,575. So I'm going to hit, and I just pulled that number out of thin air, but hopefully it's a real number. And what will happen is it's going to bring me all of my categorized transactions for that period, and I can go through looking at my statement, making sure that I have associated all of these transactions and it matches up with that ending balance. So as I go ahead and click through these, it's going to clear those transactions for me. And then at the very bottom, you'll see that we have a closing balance and a difference of this amount. So this is a poorly reconciled account because we have all of this outstanding in our bank still. So we want to figure out where those transactions went. Maybe they weren't imported, maybe they weren't categorized. But hopefully this allows you to spot a few transactions that may have slipped through the cracks. This is a really important process. Your accountant will typically do this for you if that is something that you've partnered with them to do. But really helps you close out your bank accounts here and make sure that they are equivalent to what's actually happening in the bank instead of just here in Zoho Books. So that is it for the banking module. Nathan, do we have some time before the next poll?
Yeah, it's a little early, but I'll go and launch it while you're transitioning. So this is the third poll question. But yeah, I know a lot of times whenever I used to do accounting advisory work, people would mess with the bank accounts in previous months and take out cleared checks and everything, and then it would move your beginning balance. And it's an accountant's worst nightmare whenever you check everything off from a bank rec, and then you look at the bottom and it's not zero.
So Nathan, there's a couple of questions in the question panel which I just want to address real quick. So the question was on how to split expenses. So I'm going to show you that from the actual expense module. Where I just showed you how to create the expense was a really basic way of manually adding in a transaction from the banking module. But what you really want to do is preemptively record them from the expense module, which I'll show you.
Mm-hmm. I'll give this poll question about 10 more seconds, and then you're good to go. Okay, Tal?
All right, sounds good. And just want to say thanks to Dheeraj and Val, who are going through a lot of these questions in the Q&A section. So if you have any of those, please put those in the questions panel. That way we can answer them individually.
All right, you're good to go.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so let's actually move on to kind of the meat and potatoes of Zoho Books, the actual sales and purchase modules. So when you're talking about an accounting system like Zoho Books, just real briefly, just to kind of clarify, we have another product which you can't see here, but it's called Zoho Invoice, and then we have Zoho Books. Now, Zoho Invoice is actually kind of a precursor to Zoho Books. So if you already have some sort of accounting system, you just want to do online invoicing, electronic invoicing, Zoho Invoice has all of the sales modules that you'll see here, but it doesn't have all of the purchase modules, because that's the difference between an invoicing system and an accounting system. And there's obviously some other differences, but that's to kind of grossly simplify things. So when you are looking at all of these different sales modules, there's a certain workflow that Zoho Books has set up. And you don't have to use that workflow exactly. And you have the option to actually turn off the modules that you're not going to use. So the way that you do that is, if you need to do that, you can do that under Settings, and then you'll go to Preferences. And on the very first option here under General, you'll see I can check all of these different modules that I may or may not want to use. So if you're inside of your Zoho Books now and you notice that mine is a lot longer than yours, this is probably why. You can check these if you need to. So what is that workflow and what are these modules? So the very basic start of the sales module is an estimate. So if you send out any sort of quotes to your customers, estimates are a really great way to do that preemptively and get an answer from them whether they want to move on with this transaction. So when you create an estimate, it looks exactly like an invoice that you create, but it doesn't take any payment for this particular estimate directly. It basically is kind of that precursor, as I mentioned. Taking estimates is useful because once a customer accepts the estimate, you can directly convert that to an invoice and not have to go through the steps to create that again. But again, this is an optional step. Another really cool part of estimates is that you may want to accept some sort of upfront payment. So let me show you kind of what this looks like. Let's actually go ahead and generate an estimate for this customer. So let's say for Aaron Brown, we're going to generate this estimate. The dates today, if you have any custom fields, you can actually add those here. You'll notice these are some custom fields. My name is Roger in this kind of fictitious account. That's why the salesperson field is populated here. And I'm going to choose a 1-hour training special that we are selling to Mr. Brown. So this 1-hour training special is listed at $149. Let's say we actually talked to Aaron and we are going to provide a 10% discount on this particular transaction. So you'll notice that that is now listed here. There are 2 ways to do discounts, and this is something inside of preferences in Zoho Books you really want to spend some time going through, and we'll talk about them, which is it's going to ask you, do you give discounts on a line item level or do you give discounts on the entire transaction level? So I've chosen line item level, which is why it shows that here. Now, this is the only line item I have here. You'll see that this is a service, right? It's not a product. So that's why it's not telling me available quantity. If I chose a product, it would actually tell me how many of those I have left here. So down below, I also have some sales tax that's associated to this customer, Aaron Brown, which is why it's calculating that here. Taxes are a whole discussion in it of themselves, and we have done entire webinars on taxes. But there are 2 basic ways that you manage taxes in Zoho Books. You can either create the taxes manually, or you can do them automatically through an integration we have with a company called Avalara. So it's up to you which way you do them. If you do them the manual way, which I've done here, you have to make sure you can associate those 2 customers based on where they are. If there are tax groups, you can do that too. So if you want to subdivide them into different taxes, and then you can mark payments for those taxes. If you choose to do the automatic integration, which is really powerful, essentially what Avalara does is it takes a look at the billing address here that we have for the customer, and it queries their database and tells you exactly what the taxes are, and calculates them and lists them here inside of the product. You actually have to save it as a draft, and it adds them, but it does that automatically for you.
Tyler, let me toss in just a little bit of advice here, folks. If you're selling stuff where you have sales tax, please don't do this yourself. Get like Avalara involved or something else involved. To give you an idea, in certain states in the Midwest, candy that has flour in it is exempt from sales tax. Candy that does not have flour in it is taxable. How in the world are you going to know that kind of stuff? Well, Avalara and these cloud tools know that kind of stuff, and it is kind of pricey to get one of these tools involved. But let me tell you what's more pricey is if you ever get an audit from a state sales tax group, oh my. So let me just throw in my CPA views here. You're dealing with sales tax, get somebody like Avalara involved in your software to make darn sure you're compliant, because this whole world of sales tax across borders and destination sales tax is exploding, and states are starting to do huge enforcement, and they're just behind right now because COVID. So that's my advice. You got to deal with sales tax, get help. Sorry, Tyler.
No, it's okay. I appreciate you bringing that up. And if you are interested in learning more about Avalara, of how that integration works, just drop us a message in the chat or in an email, and we will try to get you the previous recording we had for Avalara. And then we also have one coming up probably this spring. So Nathan,
we'll post our emails at the end of the session too, Tala, because I know we posted it already, but just in case you missed it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we kind of talked about the basics here of how I'm setting up this this estimate. Now, what I want to show you is, let's say you are deciding to take on estimates for your business workflow, but you want to accept some sort of upfront payment for this. So there's an option here to create a retainer invoice for this particular estimate. What that means is I'm going to collect some sort of upfront payment, and this is a percentage of this estimate. So let's say we're going to collect 20% upfront. What that means is when this is sent to the customer in an email, they're going to see a link to view the estimate. Once they hit accept, it's going to give them an option to pay this upfront. It's going to require them to pay this upfront, and you can choose which of the different payment options that you'd like to present them with. You'll notice that I have 2 of them listed here. So we have 2 Checkout and PayPal. This is all dependent on which payment integrations you decide to set up. So when we go to our payments integrations page, you'll see there's like 12 or 13 different payment integrators. You can choose which ones you'd like to integrate with. These are the ones that we have in this account. They then put in their credit card information, and it processes directly through that payment gateway. Actually, I can click on payment gateways. You'll see here's like 9 more payment gateways that you can see here, including Stripe and Square. The Square integration is quite a bit more advanced. Sometimes your business may want to collect ACH payments, right? So that's bank transfer, which is typically a much lower rate than credit card. We support that through Authorize.net as well as Forte. So if you'd like to get direct bank transfers from your customers, you can do that too. So that is just the basic steps here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save and send. So in this case, there's an approval message that came up. I'll talk about that. So this is the email template that I have created automatically. So this is something that's already brought up. Now, this is something that you can customize with specific information. You'll see there's a custom link that's being populated here. You can add in whatever information you'd like. It also attaches a PDF of this estimate to this email. I can simply hit send, and that's going to send to our customer. So since this was an estimate, I have an option to convert this estimate directly to an invoice. So let's kind of go back to that first discussion we had, which was on workflows. So if you choose to use estimates, you can create an estimate and then go directly to an invoice, and then the customer can pay the invoice, and then you'll have a payment that's received. You can also start with a sales order and go to an invoice as well. Now let's talk about sales orders for a brief moment here. So sales orders don't actually collect any payment on their own. The only transaction that directly collects payment for the entirety is our invoices, right? We talked a little bit about them with retainers, but really invoices are where you collect payment. What a sales order does is that it helps you group in together maybe a larger order that your customer may have. So for example, this again looks exactly the same as what we just did. It has line items, but let's say I'm selling some products and they're going to buy like 10 of these. I did a demo. These are pigments for certain types of paint. So let's say somebody buys like 10 of these and 20 of these. And these are products. And let's say once we create the sales order, we find that we can only deliver maybe half of the order at a time. So I can actually then invoice a lesser quantity than this sales order has, and then I can do that multiple times. So whether it takes 2 orders to actually fulfill all of this, or 3 orders, or what have you, I can actually invoice the customer separately, and they only have to pay for what we're going to send them. That's the way a sales order allows you to kind of distribute them. That doesn't have to happen, right? An entire sales order can be converted to an invoice, and a customer can simply pay that as well. The only reason you would do this with inventory is if you're not able to fulfill the entire order. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you do decide to go with Zoho Inventory in the future, you do have to use sales orders just in case. So that is something that is a required part of that workflow. So we talked about estimates, we talked about retainers briefly, and sales orders. Let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes, which is the actual part, which is invoices, which is how you make your money. So when I first click on invoices, it brings me to the screen that shows me all of my invoices here. I have some quick information here at the top. I can also filter between different types of statuses. So let's say I want to view overdue invoices. I can click on those. It's going to give me all of that information. If I want to view ones that have already been maybe partially paid or fully paid, I can click on a view to view that. And then finally, I can also create my own custom views. So if you have some views that you typically like to take a look at, maybe it has invoices that are a certain amount. So let's say invoices greater than, when the invoice amount, we'll do amount, is greater than or equal to $2,000. I want to have a view of those. Maybe it's called the large invoice view, and I can simply click on that drop down, and that'll be available there. I can save this, who this is shared to. So now whenever I click on this drop down, it's only going to show me invoices over $1,000 or $2,000. I'm sorry. So those are some options you have here for filters. Now, when you're taking a look at creating an invoice, there's a few different ways. This is like all the other transactions. There's a plus icon. There's a plus new here. They both go to the same place. Even on the home screen, it goes to the same place. So creating this is going to look really familiar to you. Again, ignore some information that I have coming in from my Zoho inventory integration here. So one of the most important things to kind of take a look at is making sure those payment gateways are set up, and that if you have any kind of regular things that you do, that those templates are set up too. So for example, the template for this particular invoice, you'll see here at the very, very bottom, it defaulted to my standard template, and I can change it to a different template. So these are custom templates that we've created already, and you can actually go ahead and set up these custom templates inside of your settings and preferences. So I'll show you what those look like once we jump into settings and kind of take a look at that. But that's going to be how the customer actually views it on a PDF. So make sure that all of those are set up. And once you do, you can simply send out invoices to customers and be on your way. So that is just some of the basic options here. I want to point out a few other things that you may be wondering what these are. So recurring invoices, right? Recurring invoices basically let you set up an invoice and then send the same exact invoice on a certain frequency. So this frequency may be every month. It might be every 6 months, maybe every 3 months. It's essentially a subscription. It's a really basic subscription, but it's going to be the exact repetition of whatever this invoice is. And you can actually set up certain gateways that allow you to charge the customer automatically as well. So exactly as a subscription would. Now, not all of the gateways allow you to do this, but it'll tell you which ones allow recharge options. If you are finding yourself doing a lot of these and you need more sophistication in the way that your subscription management is set up, that's where Zoho Subscriptions comes along. So it basically takes this recurring invoice module and it kind of dials that up to 11. It lets you do a whole lot more. It lets customers self-sign up or enroll in subscriptions. It allows them to set up a view to view a portal, cancel their subscription, downgrade. And there's some different options for the way subscriptions operate. So instead of an invoice repeating itself, you actually create plans, and you can do different tiered plans. So the way that Zoho Books is sold on a basic, professional, and standard plan, you can do something similar with your own line of products. So that's where recurring invoices and Zoho Subscriptions comes into play. So that is kind of the basics here of the sales module. I'm going to take a quick look at the questions panel just to see if there are any questions there that I can answer. I'm sure Dheeraj has probably answered a lot of them.
Yeah, he's been conquering it. I'll go ahead and launch the fourth poll question while you look through those. And if you have any questions for Tala right now is a good time to ask them.
And Dheeraj, if you happen to see any questions that you think would be helpful to bring up, feel free to jump in and let me know.
Yeah, sure, Tala. I've actually one that's posted by Greg. So he said he's running a monthly rent business. So I just wanted to add up saying that recurring invoices, what Talha just explained, that's the answer for you. So that's completely automates your recurring payments. You can set up your rent and you can connect a gateway and start accepting payments automatically to collect your rent. So
no, thank you so much. So that's a great explanation. And like the basic plan for books It's, I think, really helpful for rental businesses because you have, just a handful of clients, if that. But there's another question. I don't know if it's from the same asker, which was, is it better to stick with one payment gateway for both types of transactions, ACH and credit card, or two separate ones? So what's interesting with payment gateways is that it entirely depends on your relationship with the payment gateway. So Zoho doesn't have any charges for integrating with a payment gateway, right? We set up the software integration, and then they provide the service. You are then able to go in and view the rates that each payment gateway has. So different payment gateways charge, the standard rates for credit card processing are something along the lines of like 2.79% to 2.9% plus 30 cents a transaction, which of course can get very expensive if you are doing large transactions that are like $5,000, or even anything more than a few $100s. And so that's where ACH comes into play. So ACH transactions typically range, they're about like 30 to 50 cents per transaction flat, right, without a percentage fee, which is why those are so more appealing, but it's of course a little bit more work for the customer. As far as my experience goes and talking to customers, I don't think it really matters if you have multiple payment gateways. They typically don't charge, they typically charge based on volume, not for having an integration set up. So the more volume you do, the more you have to pay them based on those fees. So I think what's best is shop around, look at the different payment gateways, and find the one that works for you. And because it's kind of a holistic process. It's like applying for, it's essentially like applying for credit because they are able to kind of take on a risk of who your customers are to help process those transactions. So that's kind of my 2 cents on payment gateways. Sorry that went a little deep in the weeds there. All right, let's move on to purchases. Now, this is, of course, the mirror image of sales in an accounting system. So when we're taking a look at purchases, we are, and I skipped one area, and I did that on purpose, which I'm going to come back to, which is customers. But when we take a look at the different modules of purchases, we are going to look at expenses and purchase orders and bills. So those are kind of the main options you have here. So let's talk a little bit more about expenses. So the expense module here inside of Zoho Books has a lot of different options. So one is that once you record a basic expense, you can actually do this from your phone. So the Zoho Books mobile app is really powerful, has a lot of different functions that make expense management a whole lot easier. The one that is most important is the ability to scan receipts. So there is an option to scan receipts inside the Zoho Books app, but there's also a more sophisticated way of scanning receipts from inside of the Zoho Expense app. So let's talk a little bit about the differences there. So when you talk about the expense module here inside of Zoho Books, you're talking about overhead expenses. You're talking about rent expense, expenses that may be associated to customers, just the regular gamut of expenses. When you're talking about Zoho Expense, that is much more directed at employee expenses and reimbursements. So if you have 3 or 4 or 10 employees who have their own company credit card, or they're using their own personal credit card for company expenses, and you need to reimburse them, Zoho Expense lets them take unlimited pictures of their receipts. It auto scans those receipts into expense transactions, and then it lets the user put all those expenses into a report and then submit the report to their manager. And then the manager can then approve them. So once reports are approved in Zoho Expense, those expenses get brought into Zoho Books through the integration. That's different than setting up expenses directly here. Again, these are more like overhead expenses. So you're not going to separate them necessarily based on your employees here. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. If you have more questions on expense, I'm happy to answer them directly. And of course, we do a bunch of expense webinars as well, but let us know in the question panel. So moving through the expense accounts here. So the expense accounts, there are a bunch of standard accounts that are listed here. And of course, you can add your own custom accounts if you'd like. So when you add an account, it's going to ask you what type, account type this falls under. So these are the kind of chart of account types that you have listed here. And then you'll notice that there are ones that you can associate. So for example, let's say I'm going to record an expense for, let's say we had some sort of internet charges. So let's say this was $99. I paid this through our company credit card. So here's our Chase credit card for our company card. And this was to, let's say, Comcast. So Comcast isn't listed here. We can add them as a vendor. And if I have any additional information for them, I can add these. That was a kind of custom field for customers. I'll show you what those look like in a sec. So this is just recording a basic expense that we have. Again, I can drop in a receipt here, either from my computer, or if I'm using my phone to take pictures of receipts, we have a cloud storage inside of Zoho Books called Documents. So Documents is basically just a secure version of your Zoho work drive, but it's only for your accounting system, and it's here inside of Zoho Books. So that's a place that you can put in like tax documents, other sensitive information. You can share stuff with your accountant here. You can put permissions on who can see that. So instead of having it in your general kind of directory, it's here inside of your accounting system. And that's also where you can pull receipts from as well. So now, if you remember, we talked earlier about associating expenses with a customer. That's where you find that information here. So again, let's associate this with Aaron again. And I want to show you something else that showed up here, which I didn't explain the first time, which is potential. So the reason you see potential here is because I have an integration between my Zoho Books account and Zoho CRM. So for those that are not familiar, Zoho CRM is basically our customer repository inside of Zoho. So if any information you have for a customer goes inside of a CRM system. It stands for Customer Relationship Management. So one of the features inside of a CRM system like Zoho CRM is something called the Potentials module. You may also know this as the Deals module. So when you're working on selling to a customer, if it's a type of customer that requires some sort of longer kind of sales process, you would set up a deal with different stages. And one of the kind of common things that occur when you are selling to a customer like that is there are expenses that are going to come up. So for example, this could be a lunch expense, pre-COVID, post-COVID, where you take out a customer to for a steak dinner. And the most important thing would be, let's actually record this expense so we know that how many steak dinners it took to get Aaron to buy our product. Because if it takes more than 2, maybe we start thinking, hey, this isn't really worth it. But we need some way of tracking that. That's where potentials come in. You can actually associate this to the deal there. That's the reason you'll see that showing up here. And then you'll also notice tags. So if you remember way back, felt like a long time ago when I talked about tags in the items module, this is the same exact thing. So these are the same custom categories I've created. If there are certain lines of business, which was the example I gave earlier, you'd like to associate to, you can. But of course, this really depends. The only limit here is your imagination in terms of how you want to categorize these transactions. So that is the basic premise of recording expenses. Now, there are some advanced functions here that I want to go into. One of those is the ability to itemize expenses. So if you have a single receipt and you have multiple things inside of that receipt, but they are categorized differently, you can split those items on the receipt, choose different expense categories, and then you can add them here. Now, there was a question about having multiple customers. That's not something that Zoho Expense, the expense module here supports for having multiple customers. If that was the case, you'd have to create 2 separate expenses and associate them to each customer. So there isn't like a specific option here to associate this to a customer. So let's say I was purchasing something from Home Depot and I had to buy something for the office. So maybe that was some sort of office supplies or some material, and then we had some other expense that was for IT, as I like to do. So I can actually split those here. Another thing you'll notice, and this is inside of the invoice module, which I didn't point out, but you'll see this all across Zoho, is the ellipses here. So the ellipses at each transaction, this brings up some additional options for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it's going to ask me if I want to associate tags. So remember those customer tags we had at the bottom are now here because there are multiple line items. So I can associate tags here. And then I can also change kind of just the way this is displayed. So if I want to, I can drag these up or down if I need to. So just a basic option. But the most important thing you'll notice here is the ability to change tags for this particular line item. So if I need to do that, I can do that here as well. You also have an option to record mileage. This is, of course, the manual entry, right? So if I'm just recording how many miles I drove, I can do that here. I can also put in my odometer reading, start or stop. The other important way that this is logged is through your mobile phone. So your Zoho Books app, you can actually record the mileage, and you can do that inside of Zoho Expense as well. And so on the mobile app, you have an option to use GPS tracking. So you can just simply hit start. You can also do this on your Apple Watch as well. You simply hit start, you travel to wherever you need to go, you hit stop, and it'll calculate how many miles you went. And then you can associate them here with your mileage recording. And so in this case, you'll see that there are employee options. But again, this is something that I typically do on my mobile phone. I find this a lot easier because I'm typically going to be in the car at the time anyway. So same options you'll see down here. And then the last is bulk add expenses. So this is just a user interface for entering expenses this way. But what you can also do, and what a lot of accountants like to do, is you just import them from the main screen. So this is from an Excel file or a CSV file if you need to bring those in. So that is kind of an overview of the basic expenses here inside of Zoho Books. You'll notice that there are some similar options that we saw, like recurring expenses. So if I have, again, that internet bill that comes in for our office, I can simply record those on a monthly basis and have those ready to go here. I can put in the information of where those were purchased through. And then once we are taking a look at our banking transactions, when that charge hits my credit card, I can match that automatically to the expense. I can even create a rule so it helps pre-match that, saves you a lot of time. So that's where expenses and recurring expenses come in. So the other two sides of purchases are purchase orders and bills. Now, there's a difference here, and it's kind of subtle. So a lot of people wonder, like, why would I use a bill? The main reason you would use purchase orders is if you are placing an order for inventory that you're going to resell. That's typically the way that Zoho Books looks at this. The other area that bills are helpful, purchase orders are helpful, is if you place an order for something that isn't fulfilled, but you need to record the cost of placing that order. So expenses happen in real time, right? It's basically a cash type transaction, right? You record, you buy something, you pay for it right at that moment. Purchase orders may require a longer shelf life until that is fulfilled. So how does this work? So basically what happens is that when you send a purchase order to a vendor, right, the vendor views that as a sales order, but we view it as a purchase order. So here, I'm going to record who my vendor is. And let's say I'm sending this to, a certain vendor we have here called Skyline Display, where I want this to be delivered to. So you have an option to drop ship that here. So if I'm telling the vendor, I actually need you to send it directly to the customer, I can put in the customer's information on this purchase order. So when I send it to them, they'll have that information right away. And I'm going to select the items that we have here. So as I mentioned, this is really centered around inventory. So if I can see exactly how many stock I'm at for all these different items here. So let's say I am purchasing card paper, and we have 14 units, and I need to purchase 10 additional units at a rate of $10 per unit. And I can go ahead and add whatever I'm purchasing from this vendor and send this to them. Then once the vendor sends me an invoice and tells me to pay for these things that I ordered, I then convert this to a bill. So a bill is where money leaves your company inside of Zoho Books. So you can simply convert a purchase order directly to a bill, or if you need to create it manually, you can do so as well. And then this is actually where you would record how you are paying for this. So inside of Zoho Books, there is a check printing option, which happens from bills. You can view that under templates. So if you want to do like custom check printing, you have to order the actual check template that Zoho has, and then you'd be able to use that check printing feature here inside of purchases. So that is it for the actual basics of purchases. I know I spend a whole lot of time, but that's really where the majority of stuff happens in Zoho Books. And so I wanted to focus on that more. Now, the other thing I want to take a look at are customers and vendors. But I want to see if we need to launch a poll and if anyone has any questions on anything so far before I do that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and launch the 5th poll question. And Tala, I do just want to let you know that we have about roughly 20 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just like to throw in, folks, I think you're all doing really well with questions and comments and everything. So I hope, I mean, we really do worry about our content coming into these things. We talk about it for quite a while in planning. So we certainly hope this is worthwhile to you to see kind of what's going on and what we could possibly do to help you.
And there are some questions in the questions panel that I'd like to address. So there's a question from Crystal, which is, if someone is using Zoho Books and unfortunately, if their company goes under, is there a way to download all the data? Yes. So there is actually a bulk download option inside of Zoho Books that allows you to simply hit a button inside of settings, download an entire file of everything inside your Zoho Books account. So this is all the transactions. And then you can do that. If you need to pull list data, so list data means things like customer lists, vendor list, product list. You can go to each one of those areas. So let's say customers, and you'll see at the top right, there is this hamburger icon or the 3 horizontal lines. And then you'll see that there's an export option for that list. So you can do that for all those different areas here inside of this module. So that was a question that someone had on exporting data. Just on the topic of data real quick. So Zoho Books will keep your data as long as you have a subscription with Zoho. If your subscription with Zoho ends, of course, you can export all of that data at any time. That export is, and I can actually show you, is in a CSV format or a Microsoft Excel file. If you need to password protect this file, you can as well. Zoho typically keeps your data inside of the account if it's inactive for something along the lines of like 6 months to 12 months. It kind of depends when we do a clearing out of our data centers. So that happens twice a year. And so depending on how long the account is inactive, the data may still be in there. Of course, if you decide to cancel your subscription and you want to delete everything in your account, then that information is deleted immediately. But if you kind of leave the login up and you just want to access that information, you can as well.
Tala, here's one for you that I think everyone ought to hear. You know, our expense app on a mobile phone is really easy to use. The particular person had a question about the mileage side of that expense app. Do you want to just talk them through how easy that is to use, the mileage tracker?
Yeah, sure. So the mileage tracker, as I mentioned, there's the Zoho Books application, which lets you basically just on your phone enter in the miles you traveled or use the GPS tracking. There's also an address tracking in there, so you can put like your start and ending address. It's a whole lot easier to do it from your phone because typically, if you're going to do it from your computer, you have to write it down somewhere anyway. So instead of writing it down in like a notebook or in your notes app on your phone, it's just easier to put it in the direct system that's going to record it, and then you kind of save yourself a step. So the way I typically use that is in Zoho Expense, right? So it's that other application I talked about, because when I work at, when I'm submitting expenses for Zoho, they're employee expenses and sometimes they're reimbursements. Zoho Expense has the same exact options that Zoho Books, the mobile app, does. And so I usually use like the GPS tracking, hit start and stop, and then record the mileage. And then so you can actually set up, what those reimbursements look like in Zoho Expense. So like the federal reimbursement is like what, like 55 cents a mile or something?
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that way you can simply calculate that reimbursement directly there. But Zoho Books does a great job of the same thing. It's just inside the Zoho Books mobile app, and it's included for free as part of your Zoho subscription. There's nothing additional that you have to do for that.
Yeah, the trick is making sure you remember to start and stop. There's a few other apps out there in the market that will automatically see you're moving, and they'll record trips, and then you can go back later and say, was that business or personal? We take the different approach, saying if it's going to be a business trip, you got to turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a really useful feature. We're not going to have time today to go into the mobile app, but if you have, an iPhone or Android, and I think for the longest time we supported Windows Phone as well. I'm positive that there's no one out there with a Windows Phone, but
hey,
no way. I highly doubt that.
Nathan, I don't believe that.
5 years.
But you can download those apps and give them a go, and it's going to have all the information from your Zoho Books account. Most of what you can do from a user interface perspective is something you can do inside the mobile app. So for example, creating invoices, creating expenses, logging time for projects, you can do that. But anything that's greater than that, like for example, anything with preferences or settings or customizations, you have to come here into the actual browser app to do that. All right, so I have about 15 minutes left, and I want to go through a number of things. So kind of strap in because there's still quite a bit. So one is customers. So customer information here inside of Zoho Books is exactly what you expect. These are customers that you are selling to. There's some basic information you're going to record for these customers. There's a cool option here where you can toggle between if you're selling to a business or an individual. If you're selling to a business, then you have the business name that's here. You might have a primary contact. And then you have some additional people that you may be talking to inside of this business, and they have emails too. So this allows you to send them emails and things like that. One thing you'll notice kind of across the different modules of Zoho, so whether it's customers, expenses, invoices, sales orders, etc., is you have the option to create custom fields. So this is just a custom field that was created here for this demo account, but you may have some custom information that you need to record for your customers. And that's where you can create this field. So you don't have to use just this basic information that we're collecting. You can create your own fields. You'll also notice that we have the same reporting tags. So if I want to associate a customer with a particular region that I've set up, I can then run reports based on those regions and view sales or purchases from those reports. So that is the basics of the customers tab. There's a few options here that are really important. One is that once, let me go into a particular customer. So I'll go into this customer. Let's go into a customer that has some data. Let's go to our good friend, Aaron Brown. So Aaron's got a bunch of data here. He owes us a bunch of money too. But you can see here the information that's listed here. One thing that you'll notice here is portal status. So Zoho Books has a customer portal that customers can access on their own. They can log in on their own. So let me show you really quickly what that looks like. So under More, you'll see Configure Client Portal. This is going to give you the ability to invite them to this portal. So I can simply hit save. It sends them an email. And under templates, you'll see what that email looks like. I can also set up a password for Aaron and then communicate that password to him if I need to. So what this portal looks like, if I go into settings, and I'm going to go into my preferences, you'll see portal here. This is one of the options. So the portal here, you set up a custom portal name, and it generates this URL for you. If you want to set up a custom domain, you can actually map your own domain here. So that way, if you have like mybusiness.com, you can have portal.mybusiness.com, and instead of having Zoho Books listed on the URL. So that way you can put this as a button on your website or otherwise. When I come into this portal, you'll notice that it doesn't have any Zoho branding, right? This is the logo for this company. It really doesn't show anything that lets us know that this is a Zoho option. I'm going to try to log into this portal, see if I remember the password. I think it's working. Cool. All right, so now I'm in. So this is my customer portal. So as a customer, I can log in here, and this customer can see that they have one outstanding invoice, and they can pay that directly here. They can see all these other invoices that they have recorded transactions for. One of the cool things is that you can give the customer permission to do this. You can remove their permission too, but you can give them the permission to update their own billing and shipping address information or email information. So let's say they move and they need to update that information. That way they don't have to let you know. It'll automatically update in Zoho Books for you, and it'll update across all the other Zoho apps that you have tied into Zoho Books. So let's say you're using Zoho CRM, Zoho Inventory, everything. It'll update all that information here because the customer did that. You'll notice a bunch of options here on the left side. So one thing to take note of is that like subscriptions won't show up unless you have Zoho subscriptions enabled for your customers. Estimates that I send out to this customer, they can view them here. You can see that there is an accepted option. Again, you don't have to invite every customer to this portal. This is for customers that you feel like would have an ongoing relationship with you and they want the ability to log in, which is a really useful way to do this. If you don't invite them to the portal, but you send them an estimate, you remember there's a one-time portal link that's sent to them in an email, and they can accept it from there. The same thing for invoices. If you need to collect payments on invoices, They don't have to have portal access. You can send them a direct payment link, which is generated in that email when you send out the invoice, and they can pay from there as well. This is just a way for them to come back and view their transactions, pull out their own statement. So they can view this. This is a retainer invoice where they owe a little over $10. They can go ahead and hit pay now, and then they can choose between the credit card or PayPal option, because I have enabled both of those options for them. If I had an ACH integration, they would also see that here. Maybe I don't want them to have a credit card option. I can remove that from the checkboxes when I create the invoice. That's where you'll see here. Projects and timesheets, we have to take a look at that. So let's actually go ahead and jump in to that part. So I just want to show you the portal real quick. There is also a mirror image for a vendor portal. I'm not going to show you that, but it's going to be exactly the same, but basically shows purchase orders that you're sending out to that particular vendor. So let's go ahead and jump into time tracking. So let's go ahead and look at a project that we may have here. So I'm going to look at this test project that we have for the customer, which is Zingo's Cafe. So one thing that you want to take a look at is when you create a project, there are a few different billing methods. So more than likely, you're going to do something like based on project hours. This means that you have a certain hourly rate that you're going to charge per hour that you log for this project. You can also do this for tasks. So this would have multiple tasks, and each of those have their own hourly rates. And then you can do that for users as well. So users that you have, and each of those have their own hourly rates. So once they log time, you can then create invoices based on that time. So it's pretty cool. You have the ability to have a really basic kind of timesheet function here. One of the advanced features that you can enable is client approvals. So if you need your client to, so for example, like staffing companies need to send an invoice to their client and approve the hours for the employee that's there, you can actually set up client approvals here to do that as well. Very, very basic, not complex project management at all. If you need any more complex project management, we have a full-fledged product called Zoho Projects that does integrate here into Zoho Books, but that is like everything in the kitchen sink. I mean, it is huge as a project management software, Gantt charts, milestones, really sophisticated stuff. So this is not that. This is really basic accounting project management. We're not going to spend too much time here, but just wanted to tell you under the accountant tab, this is where you're going to have probably the most advanced functions inside of the accounting system. So this is the ability to create journal entries, any recurring journals. This is mostly where your accountant is going to hang out. If you need to record any tax payments or tax adjustments, if you're doing multi-currency, and then of course chart of accounts. So if you've ever attended our kind of other migration webinars that we've done, our speaker Josh will talk about how to set up your chart of accounts. There is some basic accounts that are already set up. You can customize those if you need to, but that's really kind of the underpinning of your accounting software is your chart of accounts there. We have some relatively new features like budgets, so you can set these up on a regular basis. And then lastly, you'll see transaction locking. This basically means that if you close out a period for your business, you can prevent someone from going in and changing transactions for the closed out period. So it's a way to kind of protect the data that's there. All right, let's take a look at reports. We're going to jump into settings, and that's going to be taking us to the end of the time for today's session. So under reports, there are about, I believe, something like 60 reports, probably more now, that are ready and out of the box. So the main business overview reports where you're going to spend a lot of your time are areas like profit and loss. So you'll notice that there are some, of course, basic information that's listed here, but I can then customize this report. So of course, one is the date range. So let's look at last year. We probably have more information there. And I can also compare this with previous years. So let's say I look at last year and I want to compare it with the year before that. And I can also put in any additional filters. Like I want to look at certain tags. So I only want to look at the line of business, which is custom printing if I want to. This is where tags kind of come in handy when you're running reports. So I'm going to remove that and just run, whoops, I need to remove the advanced filters altogether. So okay, I'm going to run this report. And so it's going to show me, so our fiscal year runs like June to May, I guess. And so it's going to show me our previous years that are listed here. And I can do a quick comparison, and I can drop into any of these transaction accounts to view this as well. I can also export this report directly to an Excel file, PDF, or Zoho Sheets. Zoho Sheets is Zoho's own version of Excel in the cloud. It's free. It's included in your software. So if you're using a product that doesn't have Microsoft Excel, you can simply use Zoho Sheets to view that as well. And there's going to be a lot more information. So the information you see here is not everything that's in Sheets. Sheets has, or any of these Excel files have more columns and more information than you are going to be able to see in this view. So that is kind of the basics for the reports. There are tons of reports here. Really, you're going to want to spend some time taking a look at these. Zoho Books does give the ability to generate 1099s for vendors, run sales tax liability reports, view reports for activity in the system, right? There's a whole lot here to take a look at, trial balances, etc. The other thing I want to talk about is advanced analytics. So advanced analytics is an integration we have from Zoho Books and a product called Zoho Analytics. This basically lets you create custom reports and dashboards. So advanced analytics is kind of a behemoth of a business intelligence software. So if you ever use something like Power BI, it's very similar to that. This is a financial health dashboard that I've created here, so I can kind of view these from. These are all customized. So if you need to create custom reports, you can do so. You can view them here inside of Zoho Books in the screen, or you can actually view them inside of your Zoho Analytics screen as well. Again, very, very sophisticated software, requires quite a bit of a learning curve to get it working, but very, very powerful. Just something I wanted to mention for those folks who are interested there. So now we're going to jump into settings, and we're going to take a look at a few things before we close out. The main area you're going to want to spend some time on is on preferences. My suggestion is to simply go into preferences and read through every single one of these options and make sure this product works exactly how you want it to work. The product is only as good as you make it. So make sure that you put in all the information here that's going to make this a useful product for you. So for example, if I'm looking at invoices, there are certain details here, like any field customizations that I want to do. Do I want to send automatic thank yous to the customer? Do estimates that get converted, do they automatically become invoices, right? So these are all options that we have here. These are things that you're going to want to spend some time to look through. There's a lot of detail there. You'll also find other options here, like setting up your taxes and other currencies if you have any, those reporting tags we talked about. The other area you're going to want to spend some time, is on templates. So this is where you can set up your custom templates for all those different transactions. Spend some time here, make sure they look right, send yourself some example transactions, really make sure these look how you want them to. You can edit these really detailed, exactly how these look, fonts, colors. There's also a fully custom template option that you have here as well. And then last but not least is automation and reminders. So reminders are just basic rules that are set up. So for example, these are emails that are going to go out to remind a customer to pay. Automations, I wish we had more time to kind of go through some of these in detail, but workflows are going to be if-then statements. So this actually changes how you use software. So for example, if I want to send out a custom email alert to a customer, if they haven't paid in 10 days, or if I want to apply some sort of late payment charge, or otherwise other custom integration, this is where you come to do that. This is one of the areas that really sets Zoho Books apart. It has the ability to set up all these custom functions. Really kind of take some time to see if once you go through the entirety of Zoho Books, if you find that there's still something left there and you want to create a custom workflow, take a look at that. I'm going to talk to Nathan about setting up a full webinar on just doing automation and workflows, and then we'll share that information with you. And then lastly is integrations. So this is where you're going to find other Zoho apps that you tie into. We've done webinars on doing integrations with CRM, how to set that up. But where you're going to want to spend some time is looking at your online payments integrations. So these are, again, they don't cost anything to set up the integrations, but you're going to want to take a look at the transaction fees that they have, find the provider that works for you. We recommend a couple like Stripe, and WePay is also a pretty good one. But spend some time, take a look at these, see which one give you the best rates. and you have to apply, right? So they have forms that you got to fill out, see which one works for you. So I apologize that I came up right to the end of time. I'm going to take a quick second to look at the Q&A section, and I think there's probably a last poll question that Nathan wants to launch.
Yeah, thanks, Tala, and thanks for going through all this for us. I really appreciate it. This poll question is just simply asking, would you like to be contacted by Zoho to learn more about Zoho Books or any other application? I know this is a lot. I provided a handout to one of our masterclass links, but if you want more of a custom demo where you're kind of talking to someone, they can show you directly what you're talking about within Zoho Books or any other Zoho app, just go ahead and let us know.
So there's a quick question here that I want to answer, which is that if you're using a payment gateway that's not listed here, can you still use it? So of course you can use a payment gateway that's not listed here, but you're not going to be able to use the existing payment pages that we have here. So where a customer enters their credit card information, if they're using the portal, that won't be listed there. And so my answer is no. Essentially, if to get the most out of Zoho Books, you're going to want to use the payment gateways that we have listed here, but it's not impossible. I've seen people use other payment gateways. It's just not as intuitive. Okay. All right. I think that brings us to the end of today's session. There's probably a screen here that I'll put up for you. Nathan may ask me to do that.
Yeah.
With our contact info, but the best place to reach us is by going to zoho.com/CPA, applying there, or we'll put our information in the chat box again for you.
Yeah, I put the emails up in the chat there for you, Tala. So
Val's already a step ahead. Thank you so much, Val.
And we have D-Raj's email in there a lot in the chat area. Just look around. D-Raj can line up a lot of demos for you folks as well. Actually, all of us can. So just let us know.
Yeah.
We're happy to help. We know we had limited time today, but we really wanted to focus in on just books. And I know you're probably dying to say, well, how does that integrate the expense? How does that integrate the inventory? We're going to do more of that coming up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So stay tuned for that. I definitely recommend, taking a chance to reach out to support inside of the product as well. D-Raj and our team is, we're individuals, but the support has like dozens and dozens of people. And we can help you connect with them as well. So thank you so much for joining, everyone, and really appreciate having you on. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. And remember, if you would like to receive this CPE credit, fill out the evaluation. Also, if you just would like to fill it out, it helps us with our future webinars, and the evaluation pops up as soon as I end the session. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tala. I really appreciate it. And D-Raj, you killed it today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.